I'm very, very proud to welcome some very special people today to this panel. First, I want to say a few words, and then I'll introduce the panel. The American Council of Trustees and Alumni has a very special place in my heart. It started with an introduction by the Honorable Hank Brown many years ago, who was on the board of directors and said, as a regent, this might be a really helpful group for you to get to know. And so as a regent at the University of Colorado, one of my, I'll say, phone a friend resources, the most important phone a friend resource was Michael Poliakoff, who came from University of Colorado. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Every battle that I faced at CU, which were a lot over 6 years, including getting free speech legislation passed and fighting those battles every day in higher education, and addressing due process around Title IX and the changes there, health freedom throughout the COVID battle and fighting for the students who wanted a religious exemption or faculty too, the DEI battle that we faced and still face today, the administrative bloat, which was related to that. It's just gotten out of control, and it boggles my mind that teachers aren't more involved in faculty in that battle, because the money is going to the administrative bloat of DEI rather than into the classroom to help them teach better. And also civics education, which ACTA has been a huge part of, and we were able to pass a resolution and get some things done around that, which Regent John Carson led at the same time. We've passed the baton to Regent McNulty and also Mark. Mark, where are you? Mark is another new regent, Van Driest, and they are doing a fabulous job. So, what is this about? What has happened in higher education? Where do we find ourselves today? Well, I kept thinking that these things that happened over my term would wake people up and would shock people into understanding that higher education has changed and has become a whole different animal over the last decade or so, many decades, but we've really started to see the fruits of their labor over the last decade. And it didn't happen. I kept expecting it when things would happen, like these crises, and nobody would stand up except for ACTA and say, oh my goodness, there's a problem here. There's a problem here. Alert. And then October 7th happened. And it was unmistakable. It was unmistakable after that day that there was a huge problem in higher education. It's heartbreaking. And so Hank and I and Michael talked, what can we do? What can we do? How can we keep people fired up about this? How can we actually motivate change out of this? How can we actually motivate change in higher education, which is a big task? Many of my friends in the audience teach in higher education, and you know firsthand what it's like to be in the classroom. And sometimes it's not the faculty or administrators that are the problem, it's the students, because this actually starts in K through 12, right? And it's why when I ran for governor, I took that on as my battle. I'm in higher education, I'm a regent, but what I see is the seeds being planted in the kindergarten class, in the first grade class, in the second grade class. So as we discuss this today, I'd love for you to go there also. As you talk about higher education, talk about our little ones who are off school today at home waiting for us to come back and entertain them. And I will wrap this up after the panel with a few words about ACTA and how you can help us fight this battle, how you can help ACTA, which is the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, one of the only groups that I've found that is fighting these battles effectively in higher education, how we can protect academic freedom, how we can protect academic excellence, and how we can keep accountability in higher education, and how we can help you as donors if you want to keep donating to higher education. I have a great place you can start with, Colorado Christian University right up here. But there's a very effective part of ACTA that can help you on that front too. So I'm going to introduce the panelists briefly and then hand it off to Michael Poliakoff, who will moderate the conversation. So Dr. Poliakoff became part of the ACTA team in March 2010 as the Vice President of Policy and became ACTA's third president on July 1st of 2016. Boy, did you get on the front lines of the push towards craziness, right, Michael? They handed it off to you. He previously served as the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Research at the University of Colorado in senior roles at the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Council on Teacher Quality, the American Academy for Liberal Education, and the Pennsylvania Department of Education. He has taught at Georgetown, at George Washington University, Hillsdale, the University of Illinois at Chicago, and Wellesley College. He received his BA from Yale University and went on to study at Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar and the University of Michigan, where he earned a PhD in classical studies. Welcome, Michael. Don Sweeting. Don Sweeting is Chancellor of Colorado Christian University. He is a noted academic, minister, and author. From 2010 to 2016, Dr. Sweeting served as the president of Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando, Florida. An ordained minister in the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, or EPC, Dr. Sweeting served as senior pastor of Cherry Creek Presbyterian Church here in Greenwood Village for 12 years. Dr. Sweeting speaks and preaches around the country. His writings have appeared on Fox News, The Washington Times, The Washington Examiner, The Jerusalem Post, Real Clear Religion, Town Hall, World Opinions, and The Christian Post. Welcome, Chancellor Sweeting. Rabbi Bruce Dollin. Rabbi Dollin served as Senior Rabbi of Congregation Hebrew Educational Alliance from 1994 to 2022. After his retirement in August 2022, he was named Rabbi Emeritus of the congregation. Before moving to Denver, he served as the spiritual leader of Adath Shalom in Dover, New Jersey for 8 years. Rabbi Dollin received his rabbinical ordination from the Jewish Theological Seminary, receiving a master's degree in Judaic studies at the same time. He previously spent a year in Israel studying at Hebrew University in Jerusalem in 82 and 83. The rabbi holds a bachelor's degree in Judaic literature from the University of Judaism and completed his undergraduate studies in psychology at the University of Santa Clara. He has held leadership positions in a variety of local and national Jewish organizations, including the Central Agency for Jewish Education, the Rocky Mountain Rabbinical Council, the boards of the Denver Jewish Community Center and Jewish Colorado, the National Council of AIPAC, and the Executive Committee of the Rabbinical Assembly of Conservative Judaism. I hope I pronounced all of that correctly. I was called in as a last-minute player here. And of course, our beloved Hank Brown. Hank, so happy to have you here, and your beautiful wife, Nan. Nan, where'd you go? There you are, over there. How many dogs do you have now? 3? Oh, down to 2. St. Bernards, right? Oh, this is how we bonded. We talk dogs. So, Hank Brown served Colorado in both the U.S. Senate and 5 consecutive terms in the U.S. House of Representatives from Colorado's 4th Congressional District. Are you sure you don't want to run again? I hear there's an open seat. He has also served as the president of the University of Colorado, the Daniels Fund, and the University of Northern Colorado. Hank earned a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Colorado in 1961. And his Juris Doctorate from the University of Colorado School of Law in 1969. In 1986, while in Washington, D.C., Hank earned a Master of Laws degree from George Washington University while you were in Congress? Dang, Hank, that's impressive. Hank served in the U.S. Navy from 1962 to 1966. He volunteered for duty in Vietnam and was decorated for his combat service as a forward air controller. He is a proud Colorado native and lives in Denver with his wife, Nan. They have 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren and 2 dogs. Thank you. So, Michael, you take it from here. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Heidi. And thanks to all of you for being here to share thoughts. Our panelists have some prepared statements to share, but then we want to make this interactive so we can have a conversation about how we move forward. And without taking more time in introduction, let me ask Hank Brown to say a few words. When Hank retired from University of Colorado, I said to him in all sincerity, I should have been paying you tuition to work for you. I learned so much under your tutelage and mentorship. So if you could just start us off with some thoughts, Hank, then we'll get into our panel, Rabbi Dollin first, then Dr. Sweeting, and then I will share a few thoughts at the end.
Michael, thank you. Thanks to all of you for being part of this and coming today. You know, I don't know of an area that has greater potential for improvement in productivity than higher education. Literally, for most Americans, whether they've gone to college or not, college education was a dream. It was an opportunity. It was a way to improve yourself. It was a way to advance yourself both economically and socially. It was an answer to the equity that we thought of as all citizens share a right and responsibility for their government. And somewhere along the line, that dream, that opportunity changed. Higher education, I guess the first university, I should not quote this with Michael here because he knows so much more than I do, but I think started in Italy as one of the first ones. And when they first started, the faculty were paid by the students directly. And thus, if you didn't like your professor, he may not earn quite as much as someone that you thought made your time worthwhile. If you think about the way we have developed in higher education, we have done something that we don't do in any other part of the economy. We pay people on inputs, not outputs. We don't pay faculty or universities based on what the students learn. We pay them on what credentials they have, how long they've been there, and so on. When I say it's an opportunity beyond any, I think the opportunity is in multiple fields. One is in simple productivity. We had, Colorado used to compensate universities in a formula based on national standards. So universities that were of similar background, similar nature in terms of what they provided in the way of instruction, and similar disciplines. There would be a calculation of what the average staffing level would be and what the average teaching load would be. We ran into a year where we had a very difficult financial year in the 70s, in the early 70s. And the leadership of our universities came to the legislature and said, look, we know it's a tough year and you won't be able to give us a cost of living increase this year, but it'd be so nice if you would move away from that formula and simply let us decide what the staffing levels would be, not set limits on us, and let us allocate the money between administration and instruction. And indeed, the legislature bought off on it, those foolish people. What's happened in Colorado and nationwide since is a dramatic increase in the administrative cost of universities, a dramatic reduction in the teaching loads of particularly senior faculty, and a dramatic drop in the productivity. But along with that has come another change, a change where leadership of universities in terms of the presidents to the administrators to the trustees that direct these universities begin to think that universities should be run by the faculty, not trustees, not regents, that they should make the decisions on what the core curriculum is. They should make the decision about what courses are offered. They should make the decisions about what's required. And so most universities in Colorado have gone from a place where you had a core curriculum that involved the basic courses that an educated person needed to operate in our society, to one where faculty at Colorado, Boulder went to a point, I think they backed off a little bit, but they went to a point where instead of a dozen courses in the core curriculum, they have 200 or 300. And there happen to be courses that each professor likes to teach. Some of them are wonderful courses. Some of them are ones that are very creative. Some of them are somewhat unusual in terms of philosophy of the faculty. But what we've seen is a great institution that had enormous promise for America and played a key part in the productive America to lose its productivity, to lose its focus in terms of direction that it would go. And most sad of all, I think, lose, at least in some institutions, a sense of academic freedom, what I call academic freedom, a respect for other people's viewpoints, and an atmosphere where scholars learn a wide range of philosophy. They're not taught to believe something. They're not propagandized. They simply become acquainted with the facts and the background and the logic. And emphasis used to be placed on developing a mind where someone can reason and be willing to listen to other arguments and make their own decisions. We have a challenge And that's to return universities back to the purpose that they served originally. That's the kind of challenge I hope you're going to hear some answers of today and some descriptions of what they are, but it affects all of society. If you think about the tragedy that's taken place in the Middle East, you have one group of people murdering another, not because they know them, not because they disagree with them, not because they don't have a reason to respect them, but simply because they're different. And they've been educated in a way that breeds intolerance. That, I think, is a major challenge our society faces. So I think you're going to enjoy today. You have some great experts here that I know you'll be fascinated with.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here on a panel with such distinguished members. Really, I can't respect you any more than I already do. And I thank you all for your service and everything that you do for not only for college campus and the students, but really for the country. Your voices are very important. I was asked by Michael to come and speak to this with this organization having to do with college campus. And I have to tell you that I haven't studied on a college campus since 1980. I went to rabbinical school, a different kind of campus. But 1980, I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Santa Clara, and I knew nothing of the issues that are, I think, plaguing the university campus today. But not being on a campus, I was an observer. I just saw what was happening out in the world. And the first thing that I saw, well, by the way, I sent 4 kids through college in the last 15 years, and at an enormous cost in terms of tuition and fees and so on. But they all had decent, experiences on the campus. And my youngest was most influenced by what I call the ideology on campus. But that is probably another story. I'm very proud of all my children, but that was really my last connection to the college campus, was sending them today. But as an observer, certain things were happening, and I don't want to spend too much time on any of them. But the day after 9/11, 2001, the day after the Twin Towers came down and 3,000 Americans were killed, more killed at the Pentagon, with a third airplane that was flown into the Pentagon. The very day after, we heard from a teacher at CU named Ward Churchill. I'm sure you all remember this character, teacher in the ethnic studies department. We'll hear a little bit more from the ethnic studies department in a second. And he called the people that were murdered in the Twin Towers little Eichmanns. And that, of course, was a shock to, I think, people all around America, but certainly to the Jewish community. Eichmann, as you all know, came up with the concept of the final solution for the murder and genocide of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. And suddenly, Eichmann's name is on the victim of 9/11, right? As if the victims of 9/11 did something to bring on this terror, this terrorism. And that was a shock, and that certainly got all of our attention. 1 year later, on the anniversary of 9/11, Hanan Ashrawi, who is a very close associate with Yasser Arafat, and if you remember Yasser Arafat, he was the innovator of airplane hijacking. And he's the one that came up with the concept. And so now, in just 1 year later, Colorado College, Hanan Ashrawi, Yasser Arafat's close associate, was invited to speak as the central speaker at a conference that they had with the students and faculty at Colorado College. And we went down there and spoke our minds about that. A terrorist apologist being invited down to a university just 1 year after 9/11. Well, I want to move very much forward now, and as you can only imagine, October 7th for the Jewish community, not just in Israel, but around the world, was and is a trauma that will not be forgotten and will not have some kind of an impact on the Jewish community for decades, not unlike what 9/11 was for America. Right? We know on October 7th, there was a horrendous massacre by Hamas terrorists who went into Israel and killed in heinous ways 1,200 some odd people that were living peacefully, not in occupied territory by anybody's understanding of it, simply in southern part of Israel, little kibbutzim, little communities. They came in, Hamas terrorists broke through a barrier, came in and massacred Jews and kidnapped 250. Probably 150 or so are still now hostages in Gaza. And the very next week after this heinous attack, the Ethnic Studies Department at CU, don't mean to, I know many of us here are connected to CU. Our oldest son was graduated from CU just about 10 years ago. But the Ethnic Studies Department at CU in Boulder wrote the following on its website. Right? It said, "The Department of Ethnic Studies, we loudly condemn the horrific ongoing settler violence of the Israeli state occupation and the brutal bombing of innocent Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip by its military going on since October 7, 2023. That's the focus. Didn't say anything about 1,200 Jews massacred, murdered on October 7th. October 7th for the Ethnic Studies Department had to do with the response, Israel's response to this attack. And no mention of October 7th and dead Jews, right? As if for some reason dead Jews don't matter. The Ethnic Studies Department, not even mentioned, couldn't even conceptualize what this must mean to the state of Israel, all the families in Israel, Jewish community worldwide. It also said, we join the Palestinian call for liberation in every corner of Palestinian lands, right? Which means essentially that the Jews should leave Israel and leave it to the Palestinians. It's their land. They are indigenous to that land. They should have the land. The Jews should be pushed into the sea. And we've heard that before. It also said, we also reject the language of terrorism used by the U.S. and Israel to justify Israeli state killing machine. So Hamas now is not a terrorist organization, but a liberationist organization, according to the Ethnic Studies Department here in Boulder. As an Ethnic Studies Department, the statement goes on, as a department whose work is informed by intersectional, anti-racist, and decolonial feminist, queer, and trans scholarship and activism, we join the scholars and activists of the Palestinian Feminist Collective in affirming Palestine as a feminist issue. Look, we live in the real world. This perhaps is some thinking that's going on in the Ethnic Studies Department at CU Boulder. Right? It's a moral universe that's just not understandable to us. And then it goes on, we must educate students and campus communities about indigenous struggles for liberation in Palestine, Turtle Island, which I came to learn is the United States, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and so on. I think you probably get a sense that what we're dealing with on the college campus is a way of thinking, not everywhere, but particularly in ethnic studies and classical studies. I can't imagine what it must be like for you to get a degree in classical studies today. Certainly not what you had experienced when you went to school and got your degrees, Michael. Okay. So anti-Semitism is really the concern that we have for the students experiencing the college campus today. Conor Cruz O'Brien, he was an Irish radical politician. He died in 2008. He made a very important, he was a strong Zionist as well, and he said, anti-Semitism is a very light sleeper. That was his quotation. And anti-Semitism on campus is a very light sleeper in the community, I think, around the country as well, and we're getting a sense of that now. when we look at just things that were happening on the college campus. You all probably know more than I do about what's happening there in terms of how the campus understands, some radicals on campus understand Israel to be a white, Eurocentric, colonial settler state, which means essentially everything about it is wrong, and everything about the colonists, like the Palestinians, the colonized, like the Palestinians, is right. Right? So Israel gets caught up in this concept of oppressor, and everything, and all people that Israel comes in contact with are oppressed. It's a binary. It's very clear. Israel is wrong in everything it does. And Palestinians can't do anything wrong, including Hamas attack on innocent Israelis on October 7th. Let me just tell you a little bit about what I see going on the college campus. The day after the Hamas attack, there was a coalition of parity student groups at Harvard published a letter that said the Israeli regime is entirely responsible for all unfolding violence. This is October 8th, the day after the massacre in southern Israel. October 25th, Cooper Union at NYU in New York, where there was a pro-Palestinian protest. And at one point, the demonstrators pounded on one side of a closed library doors where Jews were meeting inside the library. Can you only imagine a pounding on the windows? We saw something of that in Denver as well. NYU students held up posters that read, "Keep the world clean," with drawings of Jewish stars and garbage cans. When we talk about anti-Semitism on campus, we're talking about something specific. And I just wanted to mention that. If you look in the State Department, U.S. State Department, their understanding of anti-Semitism is based on the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA. And there's a working definition of anti-Semitism in the State Department, accepted by the United States and 42 plus United Nations countries. And this is the definition. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. That's the definition of anti-Semitism that our country accepts. And they give some examples, and this is what I think is appropriate and important to understand about the college campus. They give an example: calling for aiding or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. That's exactly what was happening on the campus. Calling for aiding or justifying the killing or harming of Jews, like from Hamas. Any justification for that kind of activity is considered by our government as anti-Semitism. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of the State of Israel is a racist endeavor, is anti-Semitism, according to our government. Applying double standards by requiring of Israel a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation is anti-Semitism, according to this definition, which is accepted by our own United States government. So I think you can see that what is happening is understood throughout this country and by our own government of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish bias. It's a big problem. Obviously, it got my attention and the attention of the entire Jewish community. I'm hoping I was able to shine some light on it. I don't have any solutions, but I will leave that to all of you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with these distinguished guests, panelists. Two of them I'm deeply grateful for. In 2018, when our accreditors were going to secretly change the standards by which they accredit schools, especially faith-based schools, and were really threatening the accreditation of many in the Western United States, I called two people on the phone to ask for advice. One was Senator Hank Brown, who has been a mentor and friend and a great help. And the other was Michael Poliakoff, who really strategized with us, and we ended up leading a delegation to the Department of Education to make our case, and the whole thing was overturned, and it turned out for the good. So I'm indebted to both of them. So October 7th and 8th certainly represents a watershed moment in higher education. I tell people it's not the main story. The main story was the attack on Israel, the horrible attack that Rabbi Dollin just described. But the sub-story is what's going on in higher education. And what's going on in higher education and what we saw October 7th and afterwards is not new. Those who watch this know that there's been a BDS movement. There's been a group calling Israel apartheid state. I think as Berkeley has Jew-free zones and as well as an assault on the very idea of Western civilization and the Judeo-Christian heritage. But we are seeing, and even before the 7th of October, public trust in higher education plummet. Gallup in July said that only 36% of the American people have confidence in higher education. Now it's down from 57% in 2015. So there was a crisis already brewing. And I say that October 7th and December 5th were sort of the sucker punch, really, that showed it very, very clearly. And we saw this eruption of anti-Semitism that's been well described. And lots of people have come to us and said, what is wrong? And I think what happened on October 7th and December 5th was the same thing that happened to K through 12 education during COVID. People looked under the hood and they saw what was taking place and they were aghast. And they said, somebody's got to do something about this. What we learned, of course, was that anti-Semitism is growing, particularly on college campuses, but way beyond that. And it's shocking, 78 years after the end of World War II, that this should be. We learned that universities many have become ideological monocultures, wherein ideological captivity seems to have taken place with faculty and with students. And the big question that's asked is why? How did we get to this point? And I think there are answers. The way I answer it, there are a lot of different answers that have been given to this. I usually say the reason this happened, first of all, is because of what we stopped doing, and secondly, because of what we started doing. And what we stopped doing is we've left the basics, affirming excellence and merit, teaching history, the humanities, and the liberal arts, doing some kind of character formation, let alone honoring the Judeo-Christian tradition from which our universities were born. We had warnings of what was happening back in 1987 with Alan Bloom, who said, when our schools start advocating relativism, it's going to be dangerous for our democracy. We had warning in 2006 when Harry Lewis, the dean of Harvard College, wrote Excellence Without a Soul and said, we don't teach character at Harvard. We can't even agree on what it means. And so a moral relativism and a nihilism set into our so many parts of our college campus, and that left a vacuum. And into the vacuum came something else. So we stopped doing these basics. We started doing this new ideology. And this is again my take. Not everybody will agree, but a new neo-Marxist meta-narrative has set in, redefining class struggle so they don't do the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. It's now, as Rabbi Dollin said, the oppressed and the oppressors. And of course, the oppressed include Hamas and the Palestinians. And the oppressors would be the West, America, capitalism, Israel, the Judeo-Christian tradition. And there's been this effort to deconstruct everything. And it's some refer to as an anti-culture movement. And the movement even justifies violence as a redemptive, liberating act. And I think that's what we've witnessed. Schools bought into critical theory. Critical theory has Marxist roots. It has various variations: critical race theory, post-structuralism, post-colonialism, queer theory. It's all applied through DEI, and it's really taken root in our universities and many of our institutions. That's what we started doing, and it's undermining the very quality of higher education. And of course, the fruit of this we've seen recently when there was a Harris poll of students, and they said roughly half of Americans age 18 to 24 say the Hamas attack was justified. Half of Americans 18 to 24. And 67% of them said that the Jews were the oppressors. So we have big issues in higher education. Ideologies become more important than scholarship. There are faculty grids for hiring that include DEI policies that end up and you get a certain kind of faculty member that's very different from what we've had. So Colorado Christian University, we're not the size of CU, or we're not Jewish. We're convictionally Christian. We're evangelical, liberal arts college. But let me tell you what we did, and it's different. So there were certain things in place at CCU. First of all, we have a robust liberal arts emphasis and core curriculum, requiring courses in American politics and Western civilization because of the good influence of ACTA and the friendship of Michael with my predecessor, Senator Bill Armstrong. And ACTA has been such a blessing to CCU in helping us craft a core curriculum that puts a solid foundation under our students' feet in a very dynamic work marketplace. And so students, they have to get basic math, basic economics, basic science, American politics, civics education, basic history. And we're just deeply grateful. That creates a different kind of student because that's unfortunately, that's kind of rare. We also emphasize history. So we go beyond ACTA. We require every undergraduate to take a course in American politics, American history, Western civilization, and Bible, with a focus on the history and literature of ancient Israel. By the way, our students do know where the Jordan River is, which is quite a feat these days. But they also don't forget the past. They have to deal with the Holocaust. They have to deal with real racism and racism in American history. But they learn the lessons, the blessings, the challenges of it. We also, another thing that's been in place before October 7th, we allow and push debate on campus. We want people to tolerate others who disagree with them, but maybe not tolerate the ideas and debate them vigorously. And in vigorously, we have students who learn civil discourse, and we don't end up with agitating groups. Our students take annual trips to Israel. A lot of them will go on archaeological dig as well, and they get an appreciation for just the geography of Israel. But when it came to October 7th, what was our response? Well, first of all, I talked with our president and in my role as chancellor, and we said, we can't speak as presidents to every issue that comes up. You got to believe there are so many that people want you to speak to publicly. You just can't. Not all are worthy of that. But we immediately said, this is worthy of that. This is of such historical significance that we cannot be quiet. And so we did on October 8th in social media. And then we signed statements. We were working with Ari Berman of Yeshiva in New York, and the big statement that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. We held faculty-student forums to discuss the whole crisis, to let students ask questions. I spoke at a chapel on anti-Semitism. We put my first op-ed with Fox was on October 12th, and there were about 6 more that followed after that. And then on December 5th, the very day that the 3 presidents were testifying in Congress, CCU held a Night for Israel at our campus with Jewish leaders in Denver and CCU leaders, and there were students there and community leaders. And it was really a benefit for Israel and a prayer vigil. And different people spoke, but we raised over $1 million for United Hatzalah, which is a relief group in Israel to help people who are victims of all this. We just felt like we have to stand with our Jewish friends and with Israel at this critical time in history. And so there are other universities like University of Florida with Ben Sass that provided sane responses. Higher education is not totally corrupt, unlike what some of my conservative colleagues will sometimes say. But there's a big problem that we have to address and speak to. And October 7th revealed it to be so.
I feel so fortunate to have friends and mentors like the 3 people who have just spoken. I want to spend a little bit of time thinking, and I promise you it'll be a little bit of time because I want to bring you all into the conversation about the way forward, the challenge in front of us. Optimistically, we're at a turning point moment. I'm going to quote T.S. Eliot. Unnatural vices are fathered by our heroism. Virtue is thrust upon us by our impudent crimes. I'm pretty certain about the unnatural vices in higher education. What I'm hoping is that finally we've reached a point where we have seen the bottom, seen the abyss, and we can move forward. Or to have regime changes on our campuses, the strong medicine that perhaps many institutions need. What Chancellor Sweeting talked about in terms of core curriculum has been a core issue for ACTA. And I want to spend a little bit of time developing the important thought that you shared with us, that this has been one of the issues that we fail to address, that's put us in the situation in which we saw students on October 8 rush to celebrate the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And these citizens of the academy, so to speak, were not dropped on the campus suddenly by some evil angel. We have to look at ourselves over time to see how we got to that place. I wish that we had 3 people speaking on December 5 instead of what I sometimes call the 3 Stooges meet Congress. People who could give clear-throated denunciations of what they saw on campus and could give a full-throated no when Representative Stefanik asked, would you tolerate this kind of language about Jewish genocide on campus? We didn't see that. There were too few, like President Ben Sasse of the University of Florida. But what was reflected was a campus habit of ignoring anti-Semitism, or more widely, the devaluing of religious students and religion on campus. And here I guess I have to get up close and personal. When I came to the University of Colorado, I was quite rattled to see a Boulder campus climate survey that reported that 25% plus of students saw regularly religious students being disparaged on campus. And what was the response? The summary was, we're doing great in terms of diversity and inclusion. I still gape in some horror that there wasn't that full-throated cry of alarm. And FBI statistics show that anti-Semitism in America and on campus has been rising steadily. So where was the campus outrage, the marches, the rallies? Where was the leadership, the chancellor, the presidents who didn't have the vision of Chancellor Sweeting to say, this is totally un-American. This is totally outside the values of the Jewish Christian heritage that we have. So here's a suggestion for legislators, administrators, regents, and trustees. Audit your diversity, equity, and inclusion, and whatever else belonging office, and see over a horizon of years, did they pay attention to anti-Semitism? And if they didn't, take action, take stern action. So, spoiler alert, the Heritage Foundation, Krista Kafer had to go to another meeting, but she was at Heritage for a long time, a dear friend, did some of the research for us, examining the Twitter feeds of 741 DEI personnel at 65 universities, and then comparing their communications regarding Israel and China. They found that 96% of the tweets regarding Israel were negative, some of them chillingly, abrasively negative, while 62% of regarding China with its persecution of the Uyghurs were positive. And then, as Rabbi Dollin pointed out, there was ignorance, stunning ignorance. As a Berkeley professor who wrote up the findings in the Wall Street Journal pointed out, the students chanting the ugly from the river to the sea, half of them couldn't name the river. Some of them thought it was the Nile. Some of them thought it was the Euphrates. Some of them the Dead Sea, even though that's a lake. So, hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go. And here we are. Each year, ACTA surveys over 1,100 colleges and universities and grades them on their core curriculum. It isn't pretty what we find. Over 19% only 19% require even one foundational course in American history and government, to say nothing about requiring a course, as CCU does, in Western civilization. Prejudice feeds on this kind of ignorance. And who's to blame? Look no further than faculty and administrators. And it's sad that often it takes legislators with vision, to tell educators what they fail to see and to give them the guardrails. And finally, there is the problem of the monoculture, the echo chamber that Dr. Sweeting mentioned, where the fashionable ideas of settler colonialism and intersectionality flourish and meet little, if any, intellectual challenge. Recall the joke, I think, Hank, you told me this. The department chair is asked, well, how many Republicans do you have on your faculty? To which the somewhat nonplussed department chair says, Republicans on our faculty? We don't even know any. This is an educational failure. And it's this echo chamber that breeds the sort of horrific behavior that we saw on October 8 and forward. So, what's the way forward? A shakedown of diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI offices is long overdue. And here I need to give a shout out to Regent Ganahl, who tried valiantly to call attention to this for the University of Colorado and to do something about it. Find out what DEI is doing for, or better, I should say, to our campuses, and what is it costing? Another spoiler alert. It's in the millions, often tens of millions of dollars. Money could be repurposed for scholarships, for things that would actually build real diversity on campus. The absence of a requirement for American history and Western civilization is a disgrace. It can only breed ignorance and contempt for the traditions that have shaped our modern America. And finally, if the professoriate cannot achieve intellectual diversity in its hiring and promotion, then leadership needs to intervene. And I'm talking here about some fairly tough measures. Put a department into receivership if it can't do the work that it's supposed to do. These are tools that are at the disposal of colleges and universities. A racial or gender monoculture would properly be seen as intolerable. The lack of intellectual diversity cuts to the very heart of higher education. And finally, a modest request, as Heidi kindly pointed out. We're in the second year of our Campus Freedom Initiative, striving to bring openness and intellectual diversity to campus. We have before us a $1 million matching challenge that we need to meet this year. That will help us help many other campuses. And according to your means, please help us in this endeavor. I'm deeply honored to be on this panel with Rabbi Dollin, Chancellor Sweeting, and my teacher, Hank Brown. I hear the words of Nehemiah. They said to me, the remnant that are left of the captivity are in great affliction and reproach. And I told them of the hand of God, which was good, upon me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. Rabbi Tarfon, who lived in the 4th century, admonished us that we're not commanded to bring every task to perfection, but we are commanded never to give up. We will not and we cannot. Thank you so much for being here.